It's a panel. We have a panel. Melissa, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Piers, how you doing? Alice, good to see you. Good to see you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Switched On, the programme that takes the crucial issues of the day, gives them a long, hard stare, chews them up a little bit, and spits them back onto the canvas of the UK news agenda. Some cracking subjects to get our teeth into tonight. On the programme, we'll be talking racism in football. Can it ever be ignored? We'll speak to one man who actually thinks it can. Plus, 18 to 24-year-olds, should they be made to work for their benefits? And that issue of Greece. It's another bailout. Is that super dream of a lovely, harmonised Europe finally stuffed for good? Now, a programme like this requires an expert set of panellists, the good and the great, the Premier League, if you like, of talkers and thinkers, and even a real-life MP. We welcome, first of all, Melissa Woodside is with us. Melissa, of course, is media broadcaster and legal analyst. Headhunter and polemicist Piers Bramhall is with us, and our special guest is the Labour MP for Glasgow Central. He's Anas Sarwar. Welcome, sir. Good to see you.
Pleasure being here.
Who took a massive turn from dentistry to politics.
Absolutely. No one likes their dentists and no one likes politicians, so I'm a glutton for punishment.
Well, you're very welcome. Listen, we've got so much to get through. The missing panellist, the one that you can't see here, is actually you at home. Skype, text, email, get onto the website. That's how you get in touch and make your views known on a variety of subjects. Our panellists have selected their specific areas that have interested them this week. And Melissa, I know you've gone for that issue of the welfare bill.
I have, yes. I went out and about and I met with some interesting people, and quite frankly, it looks like this work experience programme is slave labour.
You're going with slave labour. We'll find out more what Melissa has to say on this in a few moments' time. Now, Piers, you're looking at that hot potato that is Europe, particularly what's happening with Greece.
Absolutely. The bailout or default of Greece is obviously something that's going to affect economies globally, and obviously a very important topical issue at the moment.
And Anas, I know that we will get into this in more detail a little later. Racism in football. I thought that was a conversation we had 20 years ago and it had gone away.
Look, I think there's still challenges, absolutely. I think the recent scandals that have taken place have shown there's still challenges. I think we are moving forward across the United Kingdom, but you've got to be aware to what's happening, and the focus is still going to be there, and that's why campaigns like Show Racism, the Red Card, and other campaigns are really, really important. Does
it seem odd to you that something that we thought had kind of been addressed is now back, not just on the back pages, but on the front pages?
I think anyone that's campaigned against racism knows it's something that was on the downfall, but never gone away. It still exists. Sadly, inequality, injustice still exists right across the United Kingdom. We've got to take it on head on.
We'll find out more about that particular issue a little bit later on. Don't forget, Skype, text, email, you know the drill. First, though, we're going to find out about our first subject. Let's see what's been bugging Melissa this week.
If you were an unemployed legal graduate, dentist, plumber, or you had no education at all, would you choose between working for free at a company like Tesco's, or would you try to find your own means of finding self-fulfillment? And why are these the two options anyway? Whatever happened to apprenticeships? Do we live on Mars? I know the economy is very rough at the moment, but we're not exactly talking about paid employment here. We're talking about a conveyor-type system that spits out volunteers.
I actually done that once for the job centre. They employed me in Currys as for a trial run for like 5 weeks. But to be quite honest with you, all them like trial runners, they were just to save money. That's what they do. So they put all these trial runners in there, but majority of them are never going to get employed, by the way. Yeah. So it's a money-making scam. It's not a scheme, it's a scam.
The programme states that if you pull out, for whatever reason, early on, you'll be fine. You can receive your employment benefits and carry on with your life. However, if you were to take up the work experience scheme offer, and then you were to pull out after the specified date, you would be facing government-imposed sanctions against you. We've all cold called companies. We've all taken risks in order to get where we are today. Taking up a government-imposed work experience plan and filling out endless paperwork really doesn't show an employer that you're the type of person that will take risks. We're talking about people that are arguably the most needy in the country here. The truth is, the sad excuse for a welfare reform bill and the work experience program is another attempt where the Tories are trying to demolish an already workable system, all in the name of corporate greed and capitalism. Come on, youth. don't sign up for this program. Do something better with your life.
Now, depending on, of course, on where you sit politically on this issue, you might have been giving it the thumbs up when you heard Melissa talking, though. You could have been throwing your beer can at the TV screen. I mean, Melissa, you said there you talked of slave labour and corporate greed. Do you really stand by that?
I do. I mean, if you look at countries like Canada or Sweden, where the workfare programs are actually developed into a far greater degree than they are here, I think that is the truth. A 4-week work experience program won't really benefit someone unemployed in the long term. They can put something on their CV, but that's about it.
Isn't the difficulty, Anasawa, that the issue of trying to get youth unemployment down is a total headache? It was a headache for your party. It's clearly a headache for the coalition. Whatever they try to do is clearly going to throw up some anomalies that don't work. This is as good as it's going to be.
Well, youth unemployment was falling under the last government, and it's at record high levels across the country. And the challenge you have is you're a young person out of work. What you're looking for is either...
You say youth unemployment has been rising since 2004.
No, youth unemployment was falling under the last government in the last year of the last government. It's rising again, and it's been record high levels of youth unemployment right across the country. And the challenge for us, if you're a young person out of work, what you want is either a job, you want an education place, whether it's further education or higher education, you want a modern apprenticeship, or you want an internship or a volunteer place, something that helps you get back to work. The problem with this scheme is any scheme that actually has a job, which is something that is a job in all but name, is not fair. What you can have is a false economy of creating volunteer places in, for example, supermarket chains or in high value places or workplaces is that instead of a job.
But you're still getting paid, you still get your benefits.
Yeah, you get your benefits.
You're not getting the
what I
same
mean
rate.
is take an example of a large supermarket. A large supermarket has a scheme with the government that says we'll create 20 apprenticeship places, just say, or 12 volunteer places. If those 20 volunteer places are instead of genuine jobs that they would give if it was a normal job that was advertised, then that's a scheme that's unfair, not fair, because you're actually taking away genuine employment from individuals right across the country.
Okay, so well, let's bring Piers in on this. Piers.
We've obviously briefly mentioned that youth unemployment was coming down for the last year of your last government. You've got to bear in mind that we just entered the worst financial crisis since the 1920s. So kind of post-2008 with the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Since then, we're now potentially heading into a double-dip recession. How can you possibly establish cause and effect, having seen what your government did to reduce youth employment, and indeed what the current government's doing now?
The issue is no one denies that we're in a very difficult economic situation. No one denies that we have a deficit to get down. No one denies that we have to reduce the debt. No one denies that there was a global economic crisis that has seen job losses right across the country. The challenge is there needs to be welfare reform. And we agree with the principle of welfare reform. For example, the universal credit, I think, is a good idea. But what you can't do is, at a time when it's hard to get a job, when there's multiples of people trying to apply for one post, is take away jobs from our economy by creating schemes that actually undermine the number of jobs that are available. That's not fair at this particular moment in time, particularly with young people, youth unemployment. Because what happened in the 1980s was a generation of young people that lost their jobs, many of whom never went on to work again, and many of their children never went on to work again. The exact same mistakes we made again with this government in the modern day. I don't think that's fair.
I have to totally agree with you on that one.
But back to that issue, though, I mean, the figures of your party's record on youth unemployment was pretty grim. I mean, it was the longest period you presided over of youth unemployment in our history, from 2004 to 2009.
It's actually untrue, Ian. We were have close to full employment under the last government.
So you're saying youth unemployment didn't rise from 2004?
The youth unemployment increased.
Even your own party recognises that.
Youth unemployment rise when we had the economic crisis, which is a global economic crisis, which we accept our part in around not regulating our banking sector appropriately. But that goes different from the point that Melissa's making around the welfare reform proposals.
David,
it's completely a separate issue. We're going back to the problems with this work experience program here.
Fine.
And I mean, it's pathetic, in all honesty. This is the best they could come up with.
But isn't the
point?
Why
are these companies pulling out?
But isn't the point?
Tesco
David here says, do you think working for free at Tesco, this is on email, will look good on my CV? Well, surely any kind of experience, anything that's shown willing would look good on a CV.
As Anas was saying, anything, I agree with the principle, but the scheme itself is flawed. We need a better system. We need something more in-depth.
I think two fundamental points we're missing here. One, it's a voluntary scheme, so you don't have to opt in. If you've got other volunteer programs that you want to be a part of, you can. Secondly, it's only between 4 to 6 weeks in terms of the course length. And thirdly, 50% of the people who join these schemes end up in permanent employment afterwards. I think that's a fantastic statistic.
Piers, if you take the example of, if you're accepting that there isn't enough jobs in the economy, which there isn't. Any government scheme should be promoting jobs and opportunities, not cutting them down.
Yeah.
And if genuine jobs are being replaced by volunteer schemes, which is taking genuine jobs out of the economy, someone coming in, someone paying their taxes, someone actually helping to reduce the deficit and bring down our debt in the country, that's something that should be welcomed. The problem is this scheme actually takes genuine jobs away from the economy, increases our welfare bill because it's one less job, one less person paying taxes. That's not fair and that's not credible.
Let's remember the whole point of this is your comments. You can Skype, you can tweet, you can text, you can email. Details are on the on the screen. This is Trevor calling us right now. How are you, Trevor?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you? How's the panel?
We're all good. What would you like to say?
My daughter's 18 years old, and she was working for Barratt's, and that's one of the companies that went into administration lately. Now, these welfare schemes that they want to bring in, she actually wants to work, for a decent wage just before she goes to uni, and to have these schemes come in, I just think it's really quite awful. To have them doing these hours for next to nothing, and I think it's so. I believe I read the other day that some of the companies that have been getting some sort of money towards helping these young people have not actually been putting jobs for them to use. They've been using it for training up their staff that already work for them. That can't be right.
Is it not good to get for your daughter to have some in-workplace experience? It's only a few weeks.
Yeah, I do understand, because when I was a teenager, I'd done work experience for a cable company, which led me to go and work for British Telecom. But I just think that at the moment, we're near recession again, with so many of these major companies, Barratt's and the Dorothy Perkins. These are the ones that a lot of the young people just go to for. They're not expecting a lot of money, but they're expecting a nice, decent sum of money just to work and to live on.
Okay.
If for them to do these 4-week courses and just get nothing out of it, I think the only people who are going to earn from this are the companies.
All right, Trevor.
There's no jobs for them.
Okay, point taken. Thank you for that, Alice. You want to come back on that point?
Yeah, because what we're doing is we're confusing 3 separate issues. There's a separate issue around the economy and how we get ourselves out of the hole we're in. There's a separate issue around creating jobs, and there's a separate issue around volunteering and genuine work experience to get back into work. Now, the economic argument is a separate one. This is the welfare reform proposals. The reason why they're unfair is, yes, you should have places where people can get experience to help them get a job. That's, for example, people that I do internships in my own office, for example, with people that can get learn skills in my own office, something that isn't a job.
Do they do internships with you for free?
No, what they do is they get paid expenses for their internship, but, for example, they then move on to employment, I would hope, and get opportunities. So
it's all right to do it for an MP, but not for McDonald's?
No, the difference is I pay them the expenses, and also that person is getting an opportunity for a job that doesn't genuinely exist in the economy. So I have my full complement of staff members, and also a skills base that people can come in and learn. That is not a job that is available or taking a job out of the economy, whereas that place, for example, you give in Tesco or McDonald's, whatever the example you gave, is a genuine job that's available in the economy, but is not being taken because we're using it for a welfare reform programme. It's the wrong time to do it when jobs are scarce.
Isn't the problem, Melissa, that if you went out onto the streets of the UK and asked most people, do you think it's reasonable that people who are in the receipt of benefits, at some level, be it temporarily or just for a few hours, at some level, put some sort of work back in? Do you not think most people would say, yeah, I think that's fair enough?
Of course, there's the basic responsibilities that you have as a citizen. You have rights and responsibilities.
Well, that's what this scheme does, isn't it? It puts something back in.
No, if you look at, even companies have, Nas was just saying he has interns come in. If you have to take the responsibility and initiative on your own back like that, it's saying quite a lot about this program not working. Kennedy's is a law firm that actually offers apprenticeships and pays its interns £18,000 a year for expenses. So, and they come out of that with great experience. So, it makes you wonder about this Tesco's 4-week.
Is that the problem, Piers, that these kind of schemes, they might on paper, for some people, appear to work, but the reality is, if you revisited all those people that have been on a scheme over a 5-year period, what percentage would seriously have got a job purely because of being on a work placement scheme?
I think there are 2 issues here. One, I think that a relatively significant percentage of people do end up in permanent employment after in the scheme. And two, I think it actively encourages people to find other opportunities in the market, to focus their energies on things that they actually might want to do and start focusing their career path.
We are going to take a very brief pause, but we will be back with more on this issue. It's a pretty hot one. If you want to get in touch, of course, you know the score. It's very simple. Details are on the screen. You've got Skype, you've got text, you've got email, and of course you can get in touch on Twitter as well. All very simple. We'll revisit this subject in a couple of moments' time. More comments coming in from you and from our panel as well. Plus, 2 more big debates to get your teeth into as well. Keep it here. We'll be back in a couple of moments right after this break. And welcome back to Switched On, the only debate programme that puts you right at the centre of every issue. It's down to you to get in touch with us. We're talking welfare reform to start with. Is it reasonable to ask somebody between the ages of 16 and 24 to actually work for a little while for some of their benefits? That seems to be part of the gist of the current coalition's idea about work placement schemes. Let's go to Paul in Dartford, who's got a point to make on this very issue. Paul, hello.
Good evening. How you doing?
Hi, Paul. We're good. What would you like to say?
I think you're focusing too much on people's social responsibility. I think that another interesting point to think about is actually the amount of not just monetary remuneration people get from a job, but actually the social sense of responsibility. If you work, I noticed in the VT earlier, someone talking about working in curries. All right, that sounds like a menial job, but for 5 weeks, you get to meet strange people, you get to interact with people, you get to handle money, and you get away from your normal circle of security. You get to meet strangers, and it shakes you up a little bit and makes you a more rounded individual because you meet different people who you wouldn't normally meet in your social circle. I sometimes worry about kids sitting around because all they do is talk to the same people, and they never break free of talking to people of their same age. That people, old people especially, there seems to be no cross-generational contact. Now, if you go and work in a job, it doesn't matter what it is, there's a very good chance you'll meet people you've probably never come across before, and I think that can only be a benefit.
OK. Anas, I mean, the point he makes there is about the workplace environment, really, that getting into it, having that interaction, turning up, having a few instructions barked at you every now and again, knowing that there is a discipline within the parameters of work. That's got to be a good thing, isn't it? Who would argue with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anyone's arguing about the merits of work experience and about internships. No one's arguing about that. I think the only issue is if those work experience places and those internships are replacing real jobs in our economy. I think we should promote work experience programs. I think we should promote internships, but we've got to be clear, it's to support people to get back into work, not undermining people getting jobs.
So what if some of those big companies were able to prove that these were extra places, not in place of jobs?
Absolutely. I don't think we should judge that every company that's signed up to the programme has negative intentions with it. I think that's unfair to suggest that.
Would that satisfy you, Melissa, if you thought that these companies weren't actually replacing jobs, therefore taking jobs away from the market?
I mean, that's not the point. That's not the point, really. I mean, we're facing a huge percentage of youth that are unemployed at the moment, and we need to figure out the best way to deal with this issue. And the fact that these companies are pulling out at this moment says something about this scheme. OK,
Dom in Sevenoaks, he gets in touch via Twitter and wants to ask Piers, have you ever had to work for nothing? If you haven't, you don't know what it's like.
I have actually, yeah. I did an apprenticeship as a falconer, so I'm actually a trained falconer back in, oh Christ, that was a long time ago now. Yeah, it was absolutely unpaid. I did it for the love of the job, the experience, to learn new skills, to meet new people. Also taught me how to interact with the public, and I think it's a fantastic life experience. And not only that, but I've also done very menial tasks, as I think most of us have. My first paid job was as a kitchen porter, working for a local pub to make sure I was on minimum wage, carving out a little bit of a living, and again to provide that kind of valuable experience. I could have quite happily gone on to the dole or job seekers allowance. Instead, I decided to go for the best position I could get at the time, which was that of kitchen porter, and genuinely believe that providing the youth of today with an opportunity to very much become involved as a member of the community for that 4 to 6 week period. A lot of these people haven't managed to have the opportunity of kind of work outside of university life. I think it's a very valuable experience for them.
And we will leave that one there for 1 second. I don't know how many trained and trainee falconers are out there, but maybe if you're interested, talk to Piers. He can probably put you in touch with all the right people on that one. Let's take another issue here. It is that of Europe, specifically Greece, the bailout. How much money is it costing? What is the British taxpayer having to cough up yet again to make sure that this harmonised European super dream can continue? Well, we sent our mate Benazir out onto the streets to find out what people thought, and we'll talk to Piers about his views on that in just a second. But here's what she found out.
The EU states contribute 40% of the UN budget. It would be ridiculous for Britain to try not to lead it. I think what needs to happen is Greece needs to start focusing on building communities and focusing on entrepreneurial skills and pushing people to do anything, you know.
The Euro's designed to fail, if anybody knows, if you want to investigate that. The whole thing's basically a large Ponzi scheme. So the idea is countries get into more debt, then the IMF gives them more money to get into more debt, and then when they can't pay it back, the banks will own the countries.
Any monetary policy which isn't a fiscal policy at the same time is not going to happen, and then you have self-fulfilling politicians making decisions which affect the rest of the Greek population, which really it's not their fault. The rising unemployment in Europe is terrible, and it's a of ours. Viva la revolution.
Get rid of all the banks and the banking families that run everything, and get rid of what's called fiat currency. So I don't know if you know that all paper money in Europe is based on nothing, so it's worth nothing, which is why they keep invading countries and taking their gold.
Not taking any money from the IMF is going to help. So they're obviously going to make you, they'll privatise everything, which again is going to lose more jobs, and that's going to make it higher. Then you're going to lose all your unions, everything. It's going to be like this country, which is bad. You need people in public office. It's good to work for the state. Yeah, it's dangerous.
But no, like they said, the banking thing, if you go back far enough, if you've ever heard of the Club of Rome, it's a European thing. It was set up when the UN was set up after the Second World War, and the specific idea is to have one European federal state with no countries, which is why they've allowed mass immigration to happen, to try and dilute cultures. Even though if you're born here, you know that people come here. I mean, this country in particular is different because we are a nation of immigrants. I'm part Irish, so I know. So but that's our strength, kind of thing. But the idea was to flood all these countries in Europe, dilute all the national cultures, make it bad to say anything about it, because then it harks back to another time. And then what you end up with is the indigenous people, just like in the 1930s in a small country called Germany, blame the people who've come there, and then it gets used to bring up fascism, which gets really heavy.
Did that bloke say get rid of all the banks? That'd be a step too far.
And their families.
And their families as well.
In the ideal world, you perhaps could do that, but I think that in reality, people have mortgages, they have loans out, and that it's not practical to do that. I think the important point to say is what's come out of the Greek situation is a recognition of how right we were not to join the euro, and actually how wrong Greece were to join the euro. And I don't think we should be glorifying what's happening. There's some tragic decisions having to be made in Greece to try and balance their budgets.
And of course, the point here,
had an impact on families in the UK as well.
The point here that I know you're making, really, Piers, is that we are going to probably have to bail Greece out again.
I think so. I think it's probably pretty inevitable. I think most bank analysts will probably agree with that. And the reason for that, there are several reasons, but I'll say the main reason is because the banks are very, very leveraged towards Greek sovereign debt. They hold a lot of Greek bonds, and from our perspective, from the UK's perspective, the bulk of our economy is based on the financial systems, and indeed the banks and the private banks are part of that. And if the banks if Greece defaults and aren't able to pay back the money that they owe in terms of the debt, then unfortunately the banks are going to have a lot of problems.
So do you think they're going to default in March then?
No, absolutely not now, because we've just given them 130 billion, sorry.
Isn't that the problem? This problem is so huge.
Yeah, the problem is
the system's almost designed that you have to keep bailing out.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is, my fear is that it's not enough. And I'm not for a second suggesting that we should be pumping more money from UK taxpayers into Greece. The challenge you have is that Greece was wrong to join the euro. It wasn't the right fiscal situation to join the euro. It did. It defaulting and leaving the euro will have fundamentally negative effects for the entire eurozone and that will have knock-on effects for us here in the United Kingdom. They're in a really, really bad place, and I think we're not giving them direct cash support in terms of a bailout, but the support they are getting from us is through IMF contributions that we make. We've got to get the right balance in Greece, and that's sadly for Greece that means higher unemployment, lower public spending, and tougher tax decisions.
The trouble, I suppose, the problem with the overarching issue with this argument is that people's eyes tend to glaze over when they think about Europe, and most surveys that are done asking British people what they would ideally like to do is just leave the European Union, just go off on our own, a kind of almost a UKIP style argument, which to some might be rather funny, but people feel really serious about that. Some of your constituents would happily tell you that we'd be better off out than in.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I'm currently facing a Scottish government saying that we're better off being out of the United Kingdom, never mind the European Union. And I think the fact to say is the European Union works. Having a single market, having relationships and partners right around the EU works. It's in our economic interest to have that relationship. What doesn't work is sadly the Euro project. That's why I think it was right that we didn't join the Euro. I can't see in the near future us joining the Euro. It's got to be in the best interest of the UK for us to join the Euro, and that's not the situation at the moment.
So everybody sort of agrees that we've got to keep the Union going, and if that means bailing Greece out, that's absolutely fine.
If Greece goes, you've got to bear in mind that it will be a domino effect for the rest of the big countries which are involved. So with Portugal, Ireland, Spain, and Italy.
But isn't
it's a major problem.
Here's one of the problems I think most people have. If we have this harmonised system where supposedly everybody's looking out for each other's economies, there's a massive building somewhere in Brussels called the European Parliament that one would assume has people in there checking the economies of various countries. If we're good enough to bail it out, if it's an individual country, why were we not good enough in the first place to actually ensure it didn't happen? How did we miss this building up?
I think the primary responsibility for Greece is for the Eurozone rather than for us as a UK sterling. So the Eurozone
will still affect us.
So it will affect us, but the primary responsibility lies with the Eurozone to make sure it protects and saves the Euro and makes it work as a project. I don't think they're near that stage yet, and that's a difficult point in time for them, but as you quite rightly say, it has a knock-on effect for us here. The issue to say about the regulation system is, look, we not for a second going to deny that there was mistakes made by the last government in terms of not regulating properly, but we kid ourselves if we think that regulation here alone would have stopped a global financial crisis or caused a global financial crisis. It's affected the biggest economies right around the world, and the challenge for us actually, and this feeds into the Scottish independence debate as well as the UKIP debate on freedom from the EU, they'd call it, is now's the time not to build barriers or borders, is actually to break those barriers down and have an integrated approach with global regulation.
All right, let's take a call. This is Barry, who's calling Switched On from London. Hello, Barry.
Hi, Ian.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Well, I just want to say first that you're doing a great job and keep it up.
Good man.
He's talking about us, Barry.
Do your studio guests think Greece deserved to be where they are now? I mean, did they just make a mistake, or did something untoward take place to get them in this situation?
Yeah.
I mean, where has all this money gone?
That is the question, isn't it? I mean, it sort of touches what I was talking about.
I mean, I think
how did this happen?
You have to look at, the EU on a bigger scale, and I'm by no means a Eurosceptic, but you have to just, make the basic observation that it's the smaller countries that are doing the best right now financially. It's the Hong Kongs, it's the Monacos, it's the littler areas that stick together and the people have the biggest say.
Sure.
And, we might have lost touch
So the smaller
with
countries
that.
are doing better, you say?
Yes,
So
Switzerland,
Ireland,
they're
Greece,
they're
they're
tax
big countries.
havens. Sorry?
Ireland and Greece obviously very small.
No, I'm not going
countries.
to go country by country, but what I'm saying is we've lost touch with what the basic, the lowest common denominator, what the people want, what the culture is. The Eurozone, it's a vast, vast geographical space, and we need to make sure that we still interact with people.
Let's bring Barry back in on this. Barry, what are your thoughts on what you've heard there? Barry has gone. He's deserted us for 1 second. And I suppose that's one of the problems that, looking on at this whole, again, the way this European system is linked together, it almost appears to have been constructed so that it can never be broken up. I mean, is that a good thing? Was it? Because
I'm not sure about that. I think
the complexity of the rules and regulations that surround
I think the problem is if you get in the same mentality that the banks had, that they're too big to fail, then if you have the same crisis, if you have the same scenario with the Eurozone, then it's bound to fail. The reality is, I don't like using the words like Greece deserved it, because actually there's individual families in that country having to go through some very, very difficult times around, as I say, record unemployment, around cuts in public spending and high taxes. But fundamentally, Greece made the wrong decision in joining the Euro. It wasn't right for that country, just like it wasn't right for the United Kingdom at the time. They're having to live with the consequences of that. And I think it's in Europe's interest, it's in the UK's interest that they get through that difficult period.
So you think it's mainly the Euro that is to blame for all this? The fact
I think there's clearly a crisis with the Eurozone.
So you don't
it's an issue primarily for the Eurozone that they need to sort.
So you don't think that perhaps very stringent EU regulations on exports and that kind of thing, like as Ian was mentioning, EU law, legislation, it's ridiculously solid. Like it's difficult to understand. It's been drafted in very complicated ways. Don't you think that that's affected free trade in some way by all these complicated regulations?
Well, but the problem is, the UK, for example, its exports to Europe have increased, not decreased.
We're talking about Greece, though.
Yeah, Greece. The important point I'm making, though, is that you sometimes hear, for example, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor saying the difficulties we've seen in the last 6 months in the UK is because of what's happening in the Eurozone. Actually, it's not, because our export and our business relationship with Europe has actually increased over the last 6 months, not decreased.
50% of the UK's trade comes from Europe.
Absolutely. There's a specific problem with the way the Eurozone is made up and the way it was regulated, and that's having massive consequences for Greece, but also has a knock-on effect.
Isn't one of the problems that British taxpayers find difficult to understand and swallow, that we're not in the Eurozone, we're part of the EU, but we might still be asked to bail out Greece despite that?
Yeah, and that's why I say the primary responsibility lies with the Eurozone countries.
But if we're being asked to pay, that can't be right.
But we've not been asked to pay. The money that we've contributed is money that we pay to our IMF fund. So we've not given a specific bailout.
I think it's now a case of damage limitation. We are where we are with the Eurozone, and if the likes of Greece does default and the rest of the countries to follow, then the UK will be in a severely worse place for it.
Let's just ask then the most fundamental question that could ever crop up in any sort of Euro debate. If there was a referendum tomorrow saying the UK could pull out the whole project and go it alone, would you support it? Yes or no, please?
Out of Europe, you mean?
Yeah.
I would say we remain in Europe.
Melissa?
Yes, pull out.
Pull out of Europe. Alice?
I would say stay in Europe. I think if you looked at a poll, the poll would probably show pull out of Europe, but you need to have that reasonable debate about the benefits that we get from being part of the European Union.
Sure. We are going to take a very brief pause. We are, of course, open to your suggestions, comments and opinions. That is absolutely crucial to Switched On. It's what sets this show completely apart from others. Your ability to take part, get in touch, Skype, Twitter, text and email. All the detail, of course, is on the screen. We are going to take a very brief pause. We're right back with you. Racism and football, a subject you might have thought had gone away. It's not just making the back pages, it's now making the front pages as well. We'll find out what some of the fans had to say about the issue and, of course, our panel as well. We're back after this short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to Switched On. Details of how you can get in touch right on the screen now. Do so Skype, Twitter, email or text. All very simple. Back to our panel in just a second. But first, the issue of racism and football. I don't know about you, but I remember as a kid, things were looking a bit rough in that department. But then it got better, kicked racism out of football, and there appeared to be some pretty good progress being made. So much so that I actually thought the subject had pretty much gone away. It had been dealt with. However, in the last few months, we've seen some pretty high-profile issues surrounding racism and football, both in the stands, in the boardroom, and of course on the pitch. What do our panel think about those issues, and what do we do to begin the process of solving issues surrounding racism and football? We went out with our cameras yesterday to Wembley Stadium. It was the Carling Cup final, of course, Liverpool and Cardiff. Sorry, Cardiff. However, some of the fans spoke to us outside the stadium about their views on racism.
It needs to be stamped out. You know, the UK has a strong sporting base in a number of sports all over. And what shocks me, obviously we're here at a football ground, is the fact that the John Terry scenario is being dragged out, right? I'm not going to say he's guilty, but the TV cameras seem to know when to blur his mouth. So there's obviously something visible within that, right? But why is it taking so long? If he's guilty or innocent, get a decision, get it done. What more evidence can they be looking for from here till now?
Racism, yeah, I think it is. Honestly, we've seen the years go by. We used to get it a lot, 70s, early 80s and that. And in a fashion, it has carried on, which I think is wrong, because there's nothing, in my eyes, that's different.
I mean, I grew up here, but I wasn't born here. And people always call me names. My teacher used to call me names. So how far can you take it? You know? I mean, I didn't hate him. My teacher used to call me names, but probably he was ignorant. I think we all are ignorant. So.
No, I don't believe it is the players or the managers. I think a lot of it is the crowd, the supporters, that entices. Obviously, the attitude of what the players react on the field.
It's the system outright. I mean, even if it's the legal system, why haven't the Football FA done something about it? They were obviously happy enough to take the captaincy away from him. Is that all? Why would they take the cap? What? Because there's a rumour over his head? It's a bit suspect. You know, it needs to be dealt with. And the quicker and faster, there's always some that will say, yes, he is guilty, and some will say, no, he isn't, right? But the bottom line is, when you leave it blurring and ticking over, that makes it worse. And that's what needs to be stamped out. So that goes for any sport, any discipline. If they dawdle over it, it drags it out, making it worse. And that's my belief.
It's up to the individual. If they wanted to stop calling people, then they probably would, innit? And if the management's not going to be strict enough and give like I don't know, 6 months bans for calling someone or something, then it ain't going to stop, in my opinion.
There it is, some of the views of the fans post-match at Wembley over the weekend. Anas Sarwar is the Labour MP for Glasgow Central. I mean, I come back to what I said just before that, Phil. You know, if we weren't seeing these kind of comments and read these stories, I would have sworn somebody was making it up. I really thought this issue had gone away and been dealt with.
Well, as someone that's from the west of Scotland, I can promise you that discrimination in football has been there for a very, very long time. You see sectarianism in the west of Scotland around the football in Scotland. You've seen difficulties in the last couple of months with a couple of situations taking place. I think it's still there, sadly. I'm not going to pretend it by saying I think it's as widespread as perhaps it was in the past. But any incidents of discrimination should be rooted out, whether it be on race, religion, sexuality, or any other form of
there was that amazing Sepp Blatter comment, wasn't there, about well, it should just be sorted with a handshake, which was frankly the north end of unbelievable in anybody's mind.
Well, I think it's safe to say Sepp Blatter was a bit of an idiot in that situation, and I think
he speaks really well of you, by the way.
And I can imagine, but I would imagine most people in the sport would distance themselves wholeheartedly from his comments.
Okay.
There's no place for discrimination in any place, any workplace, and that includes football pitches.
We'll take some comments from our regular panellists. First, though, can I just get your view, Melissa, on this? I mean, one of the issues surrounding that of race and football seems to be about whose job it is to sort it out, whether it's individual players, the club, as in the manager, I suppose, the FA even, or even a higher body.
I mean, ultimately it comes down to the individual, obviously, but if it gets to the point where players are actually on a pitch and making such racist remarks, then at that point it's up to the management. I mean, they should be ultimately responsible for their players. OK,
we'll come to Piers in just a second. We've got Joe on the line. Hello, Joe.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Joe. Welcome to Switched On. What would you like to say?
I just want to get the panel's opinions, basically, on Fabio Capello stepping down as England manager. One of the key reasons for him doing so was the FA decided to drop John Terry as the England manager. Now, I'm a white British citizen, and I feel that I don't want someone who is openly racist on the pitch in front of millions and millions of people being racist. And it's quite hypocritical of him, because so many people on the England squad are, you know, mixed race from different backgrounds, but have British heritage. And I just wanted to get your guys'
OK, all right. Well, we should say that John Terry, of course, denies those allegations. There are still legal proceedings afoot on that one. But, I mean, if you look at just that point, I mean, I'm asking a Scot an issue about the England manager, which is an extraordinary situation to be in.
An Italian England manager.
But indeed, but nonetheless, I mean, you know, it raises the point, as he was saying, about the huge ramifications of this one alleged offence.
I think the important point is, as you quite rightly said, there's still court proceedings going on, and John Terry, of course, denies making those comments. But in that situation where you're going into a massive sporting event, where your captain is your person that you use for your branding and your merchandising and all the rest of it, I don't think it's right for that individual to be captaining a country as great as England. That's me saying it as a Scot in a sporting occasion with that hanging over their head. And I think it's right that he was stripped of his captaincy. I think it's shocking that Fabio Capello wasn't able to see that. And I think it speaks more for those individuals than for the FA, if I'm honest with you.
Right, well, I'll come to Piers in just a second, 'cause I know you want to get in on this. Let me just go back to Joe, who called on that. Joe, I mean, what's your own thought on this? I mean, Fabio Capello, do you not think he should have spotted something sooner?
Well, I think it's a bit silly of him to step down because John Terry lost the position, really. I think anyone that...
well, he stepped down because he was overruled, didn't he, really?
Oh, yeah, but one of the... You know, he was... a bit annoyed at the fact that John Terry was, you know, had his captaincy taken away, and it's just if someone goes around and saying, you know, horrible racist remarks like that, they deserve to be punished.
Okay, so do you think then, while the investigation and the legal proceedings are going on, and again we can't comment specifically, but do you think if something like that happens, then while that's being investigated, that person should still be able to represent their country, or they shouldn't be able to?
I personally don't want anyone that goes around discriminating people for, you know, not just race, but, you know, religious belief, or any other kind of thing. And it's something that affects a lot. You know, a lot of young children watch the game, and they see people like John Terry that makes millions and millions playing football when kids play football every day at school during lunchtime and things. And it's going to affect, you know, it could rub off on them, and they could become, you know, sort of racist and that. There needs to be more positive messages. Like there's a Facebook group which is Love Football, Hate Racism.
Okay, Joe.
These kinds of things should be incorporated more.
Do you want to come back on that?
The practical point is, and the Central Defensive Partnership is most likely to be with Rio Ferdinand, who's the brother of Anton Ferdinand, who was the other half of that alleged incident.
Sure.
So there's practical reasons why the decision should have been taken to strip John Terry of the captaincy while the cloud is hanging over his head. Now, he may well be proved innocent in that case, and if so, have his captaincy given back to him, absolutely. But rather than putting it in the hands of the FA, I think Fabio Capello should have done the right thing, lead from the front and make the decision himself. The fact that he has bottled out of a job because of that decision, I think, speaks more about Fabio Capello than it is about the English FA.
Okay, Piers, we'll come back to you fully after the break, but just a brief word on what you've heard so far.
I couldn't agree more that England players and any footballer for that matter getting paid hundreds of thousands of pounds like they do are definitely role models for young kids. There is an argument there that Britain is a judicial system and innocent until proven guilty. How they can strip him of his captaincy if they believe he's a racist and yet still allow him to wear an England shirt is another point to make.
All right, we'll come back to that because there is a pretty good area for debate too. Remember, you can get in touch and make your comments known. That's Skype, text, email or Twitter, and we'll be back right after this break. And welcome back to Switched On. Our panel of guests are with us. We have Piers Bramhall, we have Melissa Woodside, and of course we have the MP Anna Sawar with us too. And we're discussing racism and football. It seems extraordinary to many people that something you might have thought went away years ago is still very much there. There are legal cases pending. There's all manner of issues and controversy about what goes on in the stadiums and in the stands. Some say it's down to individuals. Others, of course, are arguing that in fact you need a bigger body to take this whole issue forward. Like, for example, somebody like the FA, Piers. Would that be reasonable? The FA, should they be taking charge of this solely, or is it down to club managers?
I think it's down to all three parties concerned, certainly the individuals, also the management, and definitely the FA too. I think tougher sanctions need to be brought in place to not only punish the individuals but the clubs as well, which they're associated with. And to a certain extent, it should be down to the manager's discretion as to how much they're penalised. But if the management is failing to control their staff, despite all the money and the fact they're on television as role models for the youth of today. I certainly think the FA needs to come in and indeed stamp that out.
Melissa, you think the role model point is important?
Yes, definitely. I mean, these footballers are going out and representing England to the world, and they are role models to, you know, youngsters globally. So they need to really think closely about what they're doing and their actions on the pitch. I see on a BBC forum here, the FA and the UEFA Director of Communications, Mike Lee, told the Sun newspaper, we deplore any kind of racist behaviour and we have a range of penalties at our disposal if a case is proven. I mean, I'm not sure if this is good enough, and what these penalties are, I'm not really sure.
Well, at the moment, historically, with the Suarez incidents and all the rest of it, so far match bans have just been about the only kind of penalisation.
Yeah, and some would say they haven't even fully worked, given what happened post.
Absolutely, with the lack of sportsmanship between the two of them afterwards.
What about the issue, though, of friendly banter? Can any racist issue ever be filed under friendly banter?
Look, friendly banter is one thing. Discrimination, whether it be about race, religion, sexuality, there's no place for that in any workplace, and that includes football pitches.
Okay.
Footballers, no matter how much they earn, aren't above the law, and that's why Pearce is right to say you're innocent until proven guilty, but they are role models for people up and down the country, and that's why they should behave in an adequate way.
We've got to take a call. Judan is on the line. Judan, hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. How are you doing?
Great, thank you very much.
What would you like to say?
Hello?
Yeah, hi, Judan. What would you like to say? What comment would you want to make?
Well, I've got obviously personal experience of the topical subject of racism, and we're talking about 25 years ago in East London. I was a YTS with Arsenal, and after not making the grade there, I decided to travel up and down the country and went to about between 40 to 50 professional clubs, changing my name after making applications in writing with my real name, Judan Ali. Never got a reply back, changed the tact, made my names up to English anglicised names and got replies.
So are you seriously saying that you got a greater response when you used a westernised name?
Sorry, I didn't catch you there.
Well, I'll tell you what, stay where you are. Let me just put this to our panel. Anis Sarwar is the Labour MP for Glasgow Central, and your name wouldn't be described as a Western name. Can you believe what he just said? Is that anything you've come across?
I think the example that Judan gave us, that his name, it gave us about 25 years ago. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, sadly, discrimination existed 25 years ago, just like it exists today. I think the situation has improved over the last 25 years, but it certainly doesn't surprise me.
Melissa, you want to come back on this?
I have to agree. I mean, that's the unfortunate reality with it at the moment. Something needs to be done urgently to change this.
Absolutely. I think public opinion is slowly changing. I think the 21st century is certainly far less racist than it ever has been. Having said that, we've still got a long way to go as a nation. We're a secular society, and racism or any kind of discrimination has absolutely no place on the sporting field or anywhere else.
What seems really weird about this debate is that you've got some, the one player claiming that a certain word he used was just within his culture to use that word. He himself was part of what a Westerner might say would be an ethnic minority. And he's making that point to a black guy. Now, this sort of I think a lot of what you might call whites, if you like, or indigenous whites, looked at that and thought, well, this is a bit interesting because we're not talking about white on black here. So it sort of highlighted for a lot of people, maybe for the first time to some people, that racism actually does go into other areas too. It's not just
I think the first thing
about
to say
white
is
and black.
one of the reasons I think it's got better in the last 25 years is actually more foreign players coming over and playing with different names, different colours, different backgrounds. I think that's helped in terms of people recognising it's about their ability on their pitch rather than their background. That's not to say it doesn't happen. Look, one person's banter is another person's insult, and I think you've got to be clear about you can have all the jokes you like in the world. It's the exact same in schools, it's the exact same in universities and colleges and in workplaces. You might think you're having a joke, but if it's offending, you have the freedom of expression, you don't have the freedom to offend.
Okay, good work. Now, great discussion, and thank you for all your calls, tweets and texts on this. Amazing response. just before we finish, there are some stories, of course, that are pretty interesting, but they might not make the big debate segments of the programme. We've picked a couple of them. Piers, do you want to start for us?
Yeah, one of the top stories this week is that Chuck Norris is to have a bridge named after him in Slovakia.
Is that right?
Absolutely, joining Slovakia to Austria, which is a fantastic achievement.
A nice bridge?
Yeah, it looks like a beautiful bridge. Yeah.
It's long overdue, a bridge for Chuck Norris. I thought for years Chuck should have a bridge.
It depends where they're building it.
He should have an honorary knighthood.
Yeah, maybe he should. Melissa?
The story that stood out to me is a man's crusade to remove dog mess from around his town. Apparently a former banker is spending £10,000 of his own money to pick up the dog mess in his neighbourhood.
A banker with
Former
a pooper
banker.
scooper?
Yes.
I don't think that's going to upset too many people.
He picked up 500 pieces, apparently.
I tell you what, one story that has interested me in the week of the Oscars has been this film, The Artist, and it's won all these gongs, which is extraordinary. I know they've done very, very well. However, the guy that's the central character, who won the Best Actor Oscar, apparently in France, all the narratives that surround this guy's work, all the reviews, satirical shows, you name it, pretty much follow this guy around as a bit of a, well, let's say he's not rated very highly as an actor in France, and yet he's just walked off with a big Oscar gong.
Lucky guy.
Good job he didn't have to talk.
He didn't have to talk. Maybe that's
the
what
interesting is he said more words in his acceptance speech than he did in the entire film.
Yeah,
That's
he
a good
went
point,
on
yeah.
and on, yeah.
It kind of looks
the
like a
dog
Charlie...
stole the show.
It sort of looks like a Charlie Chaplin film with a dancing dog, really, doesn't it? That's sort of what it seems. That is just about it. We're out of time, but we thank you for all of your calls and responses. It doesn't stop here, of course. You can go to the website and check out more comment that people have left, and we continue those debates over the week and come back to them on a future programme. Anna Sarwar, we thank you for coming in, sir, as our special guest.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Back to Glasgow Central this weekend?
Indeed, I've got a busy week in Edinburgh, Manchester, Dundee, and then back to Glasgow.
Good work. Melissa, thank you for coming in.
you.
Good to see you again. Piers, we'll see you next week.
Pleasure. See you then.
And from me, Ian Collins, thanks for watching. This has been Switched On. Good night.